So here's the question. Are sneaker sales going to help him raise $544 million for all these various court judgments?
Alex, as a self-affirmed sneakerhead myself, I can tell you that if Kanye West and Michael Jordan had a baby, they could still not sell enough sneakers to try and overcome the debt that Donald Trump has amassed in this situation. He has put himself in a situation where his liquid status is absolutely going to be depleted, and he's likely going to have to liquidate some of his assets. And we all know that Donald Trump very much so values all of his toys being his properties in different jurisdictions. And so what is likely going to happen is he's going to try to exhaust every means possible, number one, to stave off having to satisfy these judgments. But even in the case of an appeal, you still have to have some of this in escrow sitting so that if you lose the appeal, you have to pay up immediately. So he's not going to be able to avoid payment from that purpose or in that vein for very long. And I also think it's important to understand that while Donald Trump is trying to run from the White House or run for the White House, he's not going to be able to run from these debts for so long. So this is eventually going to catch up to him. And to answer your question quite glibly, sneaker sales are not going to do it.
So, John, his lawyer, Alina Habba, is threatening revenge against the New York judge and prosecutor. Take a listen to some of what she said on Fox.
I think the biggest message I can give the American people tonight is that he's not going to get away with it. Letitia James is not going to get away with it. The Biden administration is not going to get away with it. They will not get away with it. We will come at them. We will come hard, and we will literally fight until the truth comes out.
So what form is this kind of revenge likely to take?
I mean, I guess we'll have to watch. Obviously, part of it is, attempting to publicly humiliate and intimidate these folks. Rare that you see a lawyer on television basically discarding the concept of the rule of law, basically discarding the idea that our court system works. And so, yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to end up with, at least in the short term, is a lot of vitriol toward the officers of the court in the various courts where Donald Trump is facing civil suits and criminal charges.
Yeah, well, speaking of various courts, Charles, Trump yesterday also went after Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis following her very fiery testimony in the evidentiary hearing that is seeking to disqualify her from the case. So let's take a listen to Trump's new line of attack and then Willis's defense. Here it is.
No, I paid him cash. I didn't take anything. I paid him cash. Oh, where'd you get the cash? They're not allowed to answer that question. They're not allowed to answer.
Nobody gives me anything. I am sure that the source of the money is always the work, sweat, and tears of me. I don't need anybody to foot my bills. The only man who's ever foot my bills completely is my daddy.
So can he seriously attack her for cash transaction? I mean, what's he getting at?
Well, Alex, for somebody who's over $350 million in judgment debt, I think having a lot of cash on hand in your residence probably sounds like a good idea, or should, to Donald Trump at this point. That being said, what he is trying to suggest is that because the defendants in this case weren't able to elicit the source of the funds that Fani Willis testified she paid back to her coworker and ex-boyfriend, Mr. Wade, that somehow that is a nod to it being nefarious, or that the sources in that sense came from the government, and therefore she has created some level of conflict that should ultimately disqualify her. But ultimately, we have to deal with the evidence and what the evidence showed, and the evidence did not show that. The defense was not able to get that out through their own questioning and through what they were able to provide, and therefore Donald Trump's argument is moot. But again, like I said, for somebody who has such an aversion to cash, he should think twice about that, given as much that he needs right now to satisfy the different legal entanglements he has going on.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Jonathan, is public pressure the only avenue left for Trump to get Willis disqualified from this case? Because what happens to Trump if she stays on?
I mean, I think public pressure is certainly one way. Obviously, there's this sort of legal effort to get rid of her. I think it's going to be difficult for him to do that. But the one thing that's going on here is you've got this case in Georgia that has absolutely nothing to do with this affair that may be sidetracked by it, and that may not have the public faith that it would have otherwise had. And I think, she will probably have to reflect a little bit on her own whether she becomes too much of a distraction for that case to go forward effectively.
Let me ask you about this, John, because Trump is fighting with Jack Smith over his immunity appeal. Trump wants the Supreme Court to intervene. Smith says the public has a right to a speedy trial in Trump's D.C. election criminal trial. Both sides have responded pretty swiftly to Chief Justice John Roberts last week. So how soon does the Trump camp expect the court to decide if they're going to take this up?
Yeah, I think it'll be very quickly. There's obviously urgency to this matter. You've got a question whether whether the former president illegally tried to overturn a presidential election as he's running for the next presidential election. I don't think that's certainly not lost on Donald Trump. It's certainly not lost on Jack Smith. And the 9 justices of the Supreme Court are pretty smart too. I think we're going to see that within the next couple of weeks here.
Okay, but Charles, Trump has already lost the immunity argument twice. How much longer can he drag out the appeals process?
As long as the courts will let him. I think that he has put this in front of the Supreme Court as an attempt to delay as much as he can, even if he doesn't win. I think at this point, his attorneys have had to let him know, look, this is very much so a long shot that the Supreme Court will even actually take up this case, let alone rule in your favor. But every time that ticks on the clock, that we get closer to the actual conventions this summer where he actually gets the nomination, or even the South Carolina primary on the 24th of this month, where he gets closer to getting the primary, getting the actual nomination, he has a stronger leg to argue election interference as the nominee. And so that's his strategy. It doesn't necessarily matter if it takes a day, if it takes a week. It's all time that he needs to try to get where he wants to go.
Let me just quickly get through what Trump did yesterday, which was rail about the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. And he was present in court for a closed-door hearing in that case. That was a few days ago. But it seems like the hush money trial in New York is going to be the first criminal case to get started. That's scheduled for March 25th. The judge, Charles, says the hush money case should take about 6 weeks. Can Trump do anything to prevent a verdict in that case before the election?
Alex, he probably can't, but I think that in his mind, he's not hoping, or he's believing that he can beat this case, so he probably doesn't want to. I think for him, this is a low-risk, high-reward case. If he loses the case, he's not going to get jail time. This is a felony where he is a person who's never been convicted before of any crime, so he's very unlikely to get any jail time. If he wins, he emerges as this triumphant person who's stronger because they went after him and they couldn't get him. And so for him, I think he believes that this is a case he has a good opportunity to win. So he's looking forward to a verdict more likely than not because he thinks he can beat the case. And if he doesn't, he feels like he can withstand the backlash from a loss.
Okay. Charles Coleman, John Allen, good to see you both, guys. Thank you.